Hello, everyone. This is Daniel, and I'm going to tell you a story about what it's really like to find Satan. And I'm going to tell you in this one story the story about how people slayed a dragon. It's called Dragon Meat and Scales. Here we go. Once upon a time, it was a beautiful day, and everyone was having a wonderful time in the pleasant fields of fields of corn, and they were having a nice time with their fields of flock with the fields of corn, and I'm just trying to get along with it. So anyway, the fields of corn and fields of livestock, and the sheep were eating the grass, as well as the bison and cows eating the hay. Everyone was having a cheerful time, and it was, as time usually goes on, just day as usual. Crimes would be punished, and people would be um, traveling uh, to and fro. Next page. Then came a dreadful dragon, as she came along and took up the flocks of sheep and ate the cattle. Next page. Everyone was so fearfully um, wrought by this huge monstrous dragon that they threw their spears and arrows at the dragon, but she laughed at them because no one could find a way to kill her. Next page. They all insisted that they find a way to kill her in her den when she sleeps after her big meal, but they insisted that it only took the what do you call those people? That they insisted it only took the oh the it starts with the C now the Crusaders and the Knights Templar and also the Knights of the um kingdoms to slay such a beast. So they raided up their armies and chased the dragon, but the dragon was too fast. The horses and the chariots kept chasing them, but they lost them behind the mountain. So they had to go back to their towns and villages. Also to note, also to realize that their towns and villages have been burned up by the dragon. 2 pages later. Sorry about that. So the people brought the Knights of Templar with their dogs to chase after the dragon. The dogs had to sniff the dragon, but how would they sniff the dragon? Who knows? But they found something peculiar that the dragon left behind. Ah, yes, it's scales that she left behind. Next page. So they went on their adventurous ways by sniffing up the scales of the dragon that she left behind. The scales and the scales kept flying everywhere, but the dogs kept, but the scales and the scales were all in every other place, but the dogs could still smell the scales. The Knights of the Templars chased them on horsefoot and knightfoot and dogfoot and with the dog, just as chase the dragon back to her home into her lair. For the scales are her evidence. Next page. Mountain and valley, camping and encampment. They kept um, hearing the voice of the dragon, hoping that they would not be eaten by the dragon. But they knew that the scales would be left behind. You see? The scales are the ones that are left behind. And the Knights Templar had God to figure that out, because God would one day end up slaying the dragons themselves. No, God would end up slaying the dragon himself with all these Knights of the Templar, because they are the ones that are they're the Knights of the Templar are the ones that are destined by God to slay the dragons. Next page. Next morning came and arrived, and they saw the ominous cave at the top of the mountain. Next page, because of the picture, because it's a children's book. Then indeed they climbed up the mountain. Then they came up to the cliff, so no horse could climb up the cliff. So they readied everyone with a bow and arrow and a rope, nice and secure. Then the men climbed up the rope, and they also fastened the rope to another rope, tied each rope to its ends, and carried the dogs up with that rope. They had the technology back then. So they carried the dogs up, and the dogs sniffed their ways towards the dragon's lair. Next page. Then the dogs smelled something more peculiar, and the men started smelling the dragon, even though the scales have been completely covered in snow. And the knight said, "Ah, yes, the smell of the dog. Big dog. A dog with a snake smell. The dog with a snake skin," as they laughed. And then they went their way to slay the dragon. Next page. The wind was so treacherous that men started losing their fingers. "We must hurry up and slay the dragon before it's too late," said one to another. And the dogs kept barking at the cave, and then they found out, next page, that they just found the lair of the dragon at the very peak of the mountain. Next page, because of the picture. Then they went in the cave and they said, "We don't have to be quiet. She sleeps after her meal," they claimed to another. One says, "Wow, she even sleeps longer than a lion," said another as they laughed. And another said, "Ah, she sleeps more soundly than a bear," they said to another. And they said, "Oh yeah, they even sleep sounder than Hamuel, our king," they said to one another. Yeah, that was funny back then. Let's hope she doesn't fart like the king, said to one another as they laugh. Then one of the knights pointed his sword at one of the knights pointed his sword at the dragon's chest and felt for the heart. And he said, "I think this is a spot." Ka-chunk! The dragon screamed very loudly, and she breathed fire all over the place, but it was barely coming out of her mouth. Then blood came out of her mouth, blood came out of her chest, and she was crashing into the cave. And the men said to one another, "The cave's gonna fall! The dragons are gonna come!" So they left the cave, and another said, "Oh, there's her eggs." So he grabbed the eggs out of the flames of the fire, and then they ran out of the cave to greet one another and go to the cliff. They ran down the treacherous cliff, trying not to slip and fall. They lost a couple men on the way, and then nearly falling off the cliff. One of the men threw the two eggs on the cliff and shattered the eggs. Next page, next page, next page. And they fastened the rope to the arrow, and then they climbed down the ropes to meet the men and the horses. They ran away with the horses, and they all split up into each other positions to get the other people, the archers and Arab people, to fight off the other dragon, the other dragons. They all went in a group of knights and crusaders to defeat the dragons that were about to come. Fortunately, there was only one other dragon. It was the alpha male, the big one. As he was flying over, flaming down fires from the heavens, destroying cities and towns, and killing the people in the cities and towns. They would have the fight of their lives. Next page. One man tried thrusting the spear to the dragon's chest, but only bounced off. The other tried luring the dragon in, but the dragon only swallowed him. But then the dragon started having a standoff with the other people. And one brave knight, they killed the first dragon, came up to the dragon. The dragon charged towards him, and he towards the dragon. The dragon blew his flames towards the person's shield. He covering the shield with his all his might. Next page, and then all of a sudden, slam goes a dragon. People were so scared about his death that they came to him, and then they realized that the dragon was limp. They realized they just slain the dragon, and that the victory has been won. Now the knights, peoples, and the king named Hamuel, and all the people that live in the town were rejoicing that the dragons no longer come to Pesserum, and it was days like usual. Next page. And the people were celebrating with a feast of the dragons that they had just slayed, and people were still committing crimes, and people were still being executed for the crimes, but they were still saying hooray and huzzah to the dragon that we slayed. They're no longer going to be worries of the dragon. Just as long as we keep them at bay, they'll no longer come at us. Then they heard the roar of a dragon, and the people were worried. Next page. But it was a laughing day as usual, because they knew that they can still protect themselves. And on that day, they feasted until their bellies were full, and then they slept like the dragons. The end. So it was a children's book. It was a few pages long, but it was meant to brave up the children, just to know that on that day they'll be fighting as knights and all that. It was meant to be like a nice story for children. I believe there's no longer that story, but we can still tell the story about the night days and all that. We can still relax, relax from the pain of today, But still, good to know that I was debt-free. Okay, all right. I'll be done now. Okay, bye.